And welcome to another episode of Not Investment Advice. This is Bilal Zaidi, and we've got the NIA boys here, Trung Phan, Jack Butcher, and a very special guest today. We've got Brett Harrison. How you doing, Brett? You're the president of FTX. We're going to go all into that today of US. But welcome to the show, man.
Yeah, thanks so much. Great to be here.
Great to have you on. So look, man, this is not going to be a normal interview. This is not going to be your bog standard, boring, tell us about crypto world. We'll get to that in a little while. There's a segment we have on the show called Meme of the Week. So we're going to kick off with that, bring you into the NIA world. Trung is our very own meme master flex. So he's going to kick it off for us and we will take it from there.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is not going to be surprising to Brett. He's definitely seen this. So, Brett, I have to ask you. So when SBF hit the Senate hearing circuit, the shoe photos came out, right? And I know that he's addressed it. I know the FTX Twitter account has addressed how he ties his dress shoes. So what I wanted to ask is this: as this is happening real time, and the FTX Slack channel is seeing this all go down. Obviously, very serious thing going down, but then SBF has the shoe thing happen, and then he embraces it, obviously. What were you guys thinking, the team inside the Slack channel at FTX? How were the jokes flying? This is what I need to know.
The jokes were flying. The meme opportunism was growing. We were like, okay, how can we get people to post NFTs of this on our site? And sure enough, someone did. Like an artist came in and did they did this really cool rendering. It was of the shoes, of the laces tied in no style, but it said FTX in the lace, loops and stuff like that. It was so good. So yeah, we were all over that.
You guys were, I mean, is this, obviously you've known SBF for so long and you worked with him at Jane Street, and this was very consistent with his personality, just like all business, not really about tying the shoes, but getting the job done.
Oh yeah. Plus, I mean, I don't think any of us knew he owned a suit prior to that hearing. He may not have owned a suit prior to that hearing, for all I know. So yeah, no, par for the course.
I have to say though, the last thing I'll leave on this was the second time he came around, he said, "Okay, I'm ready." This time, his shoes were very nicely tied. That was very well done.
So Brett, I mean, look, you just brought up a big topic on the show is kind of memes, right? Like the tagline of the show is the latest in business, tech, and memes. And when we say memes, I think you get this better than anyone. It's not just about like the image with text. It's about idea spreading. And you guys have been an amazing example of that in the space. So today we are going to talk about the kind of marketing side, how you guys think about that. Obviously how FTX differentiates itself. But like before we get into that, just we talked a bit about SBF a second ago. Just tell us a little bit about how you got and landed at FTX, man, because you've had a really interesting career before.
Yeah, for sure. So I got my start out of college at Jane Street Capital as a software developer. I was building out algorithmic trading systems and low latency order gateways and market data handlers and things like that. Then moved on to managing software developers who were doing those things and helping architect systems. And it was while I was there during my 8 years that I was at Jane Street that I overlapped with Sam for 3 or 4 years. And he was a trader. I was engineering manager. And we worked together on a couple of different projects. While we were there, we realized we shared a lot of interest in common on the philanthropic side for animal welfare and things like that, fellow vegans. And then we went our separate ways. Sam moved on to found 3 giant multi-billion-dollar companies. I followed my wife to Chicago. And so we went our very similar paths. And then at some point, I was at Citadel Securities, as managing a team around 100 developers on various projects and looking to leave. And at that point, Sam and I had been texting back and forth and kind of keeping up over the years. And somewhat out of the blue, he said, "Hey, do you want to come over to FTX?" And I said, "Yes. Yeah, let's do that."
How long did it take to say yes? Was that like 12 seconds or 3 seconds?
Yeah, the yes was something like 30 seconds. The details of actually going from yes to me leaving my previous job and joining the next job was something like 24 hours. And then
wow.
And that was it. And so my experience in crypto, I really didn't have that much before joining FTX. Really, the only crypto that I saw was at Jane Street when they were sort of starting up their crypto arbitrage desk towards the end of 2017. I was a bit involved in that. But at the time, I thought this is a crazy world that won't last more than 3 months. And I'm glad I was wrong. But really got into crypto full time upon joining FTX.
You're very active on the Twitter threads. So every time you guys launch something, kind of trying to frame it and educate the world, right? So it seems like you fully dived on in.
Well, that's one of the things that makes crypto so cool. Maybe, yes, I like my previous jobs and things like that, but comparing to how things were inside of, super secretive proprietary trading companies and hedge funds, everything is very open in crypto. It's that open source mentality. People are talking about what they're building. They're looking for mutual investments. They're looking to collaborate on projects. People are very open and active. We're reaching out directly to customers. Customers are yelling at us directly on Twitter. And so it's a very different world from that perspective. And so that's why it's fun to kind of be part of the social media world. I started my Twitter account on May 12th, 2021, which was the day I joined FTX, because Sam said, you can't be in crypto and not have a Twitter account. And so that's how that got started.
I actually, that was one question I did want to ask about the Twitter and how important it is to FTX and the crypto environment in general. This is one tweet that I did tweet out. You remember this famous photo of, I think Wall Street Journal had of SBF in Hong Kong? Somebody pointed out that one of his 6 trading screens. So for the listeners, it's just a photo of SBF and 6 trading screens. One of the entire screens is just Twitter, right? So I did want to kind of follow up on that so he said you can't be in crypto without Twitter. And then obviously SBF, yourself, the FTX accounts are so active on Twitter. How important is Twitter for FTX? And just speak about the broader crypto economy in general.
I mean, it's critical. It's the primary way that we reach our users. And I think every industry and community has their niche online. And for like the gaming world, it's Twitch. And then for certain investment communities, it's Reddit. For whatever reason, for crypto Twitter, it's Twitter, right? It's like everyone goes on there to discuss. I mean, we break news there. We talk about new features there. We get feature requests. I wrote something a couple of days ago where I said, like, what do people think about, FTX US trading fees? We're going to think about those. What do people have suggestions? And people will write in very thoughtful analyses and say, here's what I think about these fee tiers compared to this other exchange. Here's where I think about other mechanics that could be better for the exchange to improve. And I think it's one of the reasons why FTX has been so successful is because we just listen to what the hell people want and then just do it, which is weird. It's simple, but very few companies do it. I mean, most companies don't ask their own users for advice. They just do what they think is right, which is never the right thing. So it's just so critical for us. It's the way that we've been able to iterate fast and give people the kind of experience that they can be loyal to. If you ask for a change or you need help with your account and the founder or the president of the company reaches back out to you and helps you, that'll be an experience that you'll remember, and then you'll come back to that company. If you're waiting 6 months for someone to fix an account problem, you probably won't have a lot of loyalty to that company, right?
Yeah, 100%. And so Brett, I mean, you mentioned it a little bit there, but just for people, for the 3 people who've never heard of FTX, listen to this. But I'm assuming everyone listening to this has heard of FTX by this point. But just how do you guys differentiate yourself from the other big players in the space? Obviously, there's Coinbase, Gemini, Binance, and other crypto exchanges, but I don't know how you guys actually kind of describe yourselves. It's always good to hear it from someone there.
So just stepping back a bit. So FTX was founded 3 years ago, and it is a global cryptocurrency derivatives and cryptocurrency exchange. And in the world of crypto, most of the volume trades in derivatives, not in the spot. So things like Bitcoin futures, not Bitcoin to USD spot market. And that's true in most asset classes globally, that most of the volume trades in derivatives as opposed to the underlying. Think about the S&P 500 future. So that's how FTX grew to be the second or third largest exchange in the world, was by building a superior product for cryptocurrency derivatives, because the competitor exchanges were doing things like liquidating people with giant market orders that would smash through the book, or clawing back from the profits from customers to help cover the losses from sort of bad operational problems. Things like exchanges just going down whenever there's a volatile moment or getting unbearably slow. And so that's how FTX developed. It became this institutional grade professional product for trading these very liquid, very important assets in the ecosystem. Then around a year and a half ago, the company really wanted to launch a US business. So FTX was available everywhere but the US, because to offer derivatives in the US, you need special licenses, particularly from the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, the CFTC. And so FTX US was developed to be able to sort of walk the licensed and regulated path in the US, which requires very specific company structure and regulation and compliance. So it started as a spot crypto exchange. We started sort of end of 2020, early 2021. We had like 10,000 customers and $1 million of volume in the US. So we were basically nothing. Towards the end of 2021, we had 1.2 million users and 300 million a day in spot volume. And at the end of 2021, we acquired the company LedgerX, which is a licensed CFTC derivatives exchange. And our big effort right now is getting the approval we need from the CFTC to be able to offer margined Bitcoin and Ether futures in the US. So one thing that really distinguishes us is that we have been obtaining the licenses required to be able to offer products which people really want to have available to them, but might not have because of the lack of licensing in the past. So I would say that's the biggest difference now, is that we might be the first crypto player ever to offer licensed derivatives in the US. The second is that we have a more diverse array of services. So we're not just a place where you can buy Bitcoin, but we also have an NFT marketplace. We are a set of APIs and services that different products can white label. So for example, we partner with StockTwits, which is a US stock social investing app that has offered crypto by taking FTX's exchange and white labeling its services in the backend underneath the StockTwits brand and application. Number three, we are soon, something that I'm personally working on, looking to launch a stock trading component. So sort of imagine approaching Robinhood from the other direction, adding vanilla US stock and options trading to this holistic experience. And in general, our sort of approach to institutional volume. So FTX globally has something like 3 or 4 times the volume of Coinbase, with around 1/20th of the total users. So that is just showing the kind of users that we have are the real high volume, more professional type traders, as opposed to the buy Dogecoin once a month type person. So those are, I think, the main things that distinguish us as a company from many of our competitors.
Amazing. Yeah, that's a great overview. Thanks, man. So today, look, we actually have an exclusive that we're going to talk about, for announcement from FTX, but you got to wait till later in the show for us to talk about that, because today we're going to talk about the wider crypto space and obviously all things FTX. I mean, look, there's so many places we could kind of go next, but what I'm most interested in is that transition point and kind of what was exciting you in the space, because you're a very experienced person in your previous roles. But curious, like, what was really exciting you, and even now looking forward in the space as a whole?
The most exciting thing for me is seeing how exchanges and trading venues have developed in a world without constraints. So if you think about the equity markets, which is the primary place where I've done the most work, there's a lot of things that I always just took for granted. Like, okay, if you want to trade a stock, you are going through like a local executing broker, if you're not one yourself, through a clearing broker dealer, to one of 15 US exchanges where you have to get market data from all of them. You might also need to route to some dark pools or ATSs or unregistered ATSs. Then the market data is like a separate thing that comes from a separate service that you have to listen to. And those are all cleared by some central clearing service, which is separate from all the above, who have to talk to all the prime brokers. There's 30 different actors involved already in this system. And every one of them is charging fees. Every one of them provides gated access. If you want the best access to an exchange, you need to buy expensive servers co-located in the facility in New Jersey, that's where the exchange is housed. Crypto is totally different. And people just, built exchanges in the age of the internet. And it sounds a little bit like old school to say the age of the internet, but it's really what it is. And they just said, okay, what's the simplest freaking thing I can make? How about an exchange that holds all the money, that holds the matching engine, it provides the market data. The market data is free, order entry is free. And the only thing involved in a trade is the buyer, the seller, and the exchange. And it is so much easier to sort of access and wrap your head around. And I'm not even getting into the DeFi world, which, has no intermediary, but just sort of having one intermediary as opposed to N for large N is a radical shift. And that's what really sort of excited me as I learned more about this space. So in general, going forward, what I'm excited about is seeing the ways in which blockchain technology and crypto, but just the mindset of building something from scratch in the best way possible, is enabling people to sort of change the model by which people envision financial markets working.
So Brett, actually, based on what you just said there, I know you used to work at Citadel Securities. I don't want to get you in any trouble here, but I know Citadel has started, they took investment from Paradigm. They've started changing their tune on crypto. How difficult will it be for Citadel Securities to go backwards, whereas you guys are building from scratch?
So yeah, I definitely can't talk about specifics inside of Citadel, and all their crypto operations started like after I left. So I'm not privy to exactly what they're doing, but these trading firms are very advanced. They have advanced trading algorithms. They have some of the best developers in the world, and I have no doubt that any one of them, if they're not in the space already, can enter with a very low barrier to entry and be successful.
Okay.
Now, the difference is that you don't have to be Citadel in order to be able to compete. You can be a single person in college with your laptop, in your dorm room and a Python program, and you can have the same exact access to FTX as Citadel does. And no one has a latency advantage. No one has a market data advantage because you have tens of millions of dollars to spend per month on market data. It's all free. It's all equal access. And so that's what I see as the difference, where I have no doubt they'll be able to compete and probably be very profitable, but it's no longer a world where they're the only ones that can do so.
Right. The other part that I found interesting was you live in Chicago now. You moved there. I'd heard on previous podcasts you moved there with your wife. Her family is from Chicago. And what I found interesting was Chicago is obviously considered the derivatives capital of the world. CME Group is out there, a lot of other big derivatives exchanges. How much of a kind of a coincidence is it? Not necessarily coincidence, but also struck a light of fate in the sense of you are living there, you used to work with SBF, and now you have access to all this kind of derivative and exchange talent. Was this part of the equation of you jumping to FTX?
It feels somewhat coincidental and fateful in the sense that a lot of the thought around me staying in Chicago was at the time, SBF and the FTX.com team were in Hong Kong. And I love Hong Kong, but I was not ready to pick up my family, my like giant cadre of pets and my child and my spouse and move our whole home to Hong Kong. And so, selfishly, I said, well, if we're going to build this US business, we need an office. How about we keep it here? I'll find some office space, start to grow it out. It was myself and one other person. We found some office space and then grew very quickly to like 20, 25 people here in Chicago. And it was really only after we started making serious progress on the regulatory front for derivatives that we realized, wow, this is actually really good that we're here, because CME's here and CBO's here and every, FCM and every bank is here and all the trading firms are here. Jump Trading is here. Solana people are here. It's just a great nexus for the combination of traditional finance and crypto in one place.
Okay, so Chicago, there is just this wealth of talent specifically for what you're doing.
Yeah, definitely. And again, the history here. I mean, the U.S. derivatives market that we know today was born in Chicago with, originally the Chicago Board of Trade, and then CME becoming the electronic market for derivatives in the 70s, and then taking over the Board of Trade, and then the advent of companies like CBOE, and then the trading firms like Jump and Virtu and Citadel and Chicago Trading Company and DRW growing these huge crypto businesses and getting involved, all being in that same nexus of geographic space.
And Brett, you just mentioned Solana there. That was actually something we had on our docket to talk about. So could you tell us a little bit about the latest with, how you guys see, Solana? I know you've got some, I don't know if you want to call it a special relationship or, like a positive take on using Solana anyway. So just curious on what is the latest with you guys and Solana, and then maybe after that we can talk about why Solana over other platforms or other blockchains.
Yeah, for sure. So we are heavily invested in, as a company, and I don't mean monetarily, I mean sort of like philosophically, in the growth of blockchains. But the other thing we know is that as an exchange, we have to maintain a certain amount of throughput. How many messages per second can we process as an exchange? And when you think about any real world application like Twitter or Amazon or an exchange, you need to be able to support a certain number of transactions per second if you want the user to have any reasonable experience. I mean, imagine, wanting to send a tweet and then needing to wait 10 minutes for that to appear on your timeline. I think people will throw their monitors at the wall, right? That can't be the way that works. So in order for blockchains to actually be viable for real world applications, not that there aren't now, but for it to really grow, it needs to be able to be low fee and high transaction per second, high TPS. And among the different solutions that are out there, Solana is one of the most, if not the most promising, for a layer one blockchain that can support that kind of throughput in the tens of thousands or perhaps hundreds of thousands messages per second. And just on a personal level, they have this amazing team, like some of the best developers I've ever met in my life. And they're building amazing stuff. And so they're great to partner with on things. They're not the only ones in the space who are doing a really interesting and potentially very promising layer one or even layer two solution, but they're some of the best.
And so while you guys, I know you probably weren't there when you guys were choosing to work with Solana in that way in the design of what you're doing, but just curious, like you've obviously been there for a while now and you're a part of those decisions now. When you look at other players, layer ones in the space, whether that's Ethereum or many of the other smart contract platforms, like what's your kind of bull case for Solana versus those? I mean, I don't know if you already kind of covered that, but I'm curious if you have thoughts on any of the others.
Yeah, so if you think about something like Ethereum, how many transactions per second does Ethereum support right now? It's like 100 or something like that. And if you want to build an order by order exchange, which is so an affiliate of FTX, and it's not an affiliate of FTX, it's sort of like a separate company that has some relations in the origins, which is Serum. When they built their decentralized exchange for some blockchain, they said, well, if there's going to be 100 messages per second, that can't possibly support an exchange. NASDAQ has something like 500,000 messages per second that go through it, right? So it's nowhere close. And so in order for it to be viable, it had to start somewhere. And the other problem is fees. I mean, how much gas does it cost to send one transaction on Ethereum? It's somewhere between $30 worth of Ether, and like $120 worth of Ether, depending on what you're doing, what the transaction is, how congested the network is. And again, imagine, 1 billion or 2 billion or 5 billion messages per day, where each one costs, $50. There's just no way people will use that service. Whereas on Solana, it's, fractions of a penny per transaction. So it's low cost, low energy usage. Something that's very important to us now is making sure that we're responsible members of the blockchain ecosystem, and we're using those that promote responsible energy practices. Well, a single Solana transaction has the energy usage of something like 2 Google searches. So it's low energy, it's high throughput, it's low cost, and the technology we think is great. So these are some of the reasons that we have dove in with Solana.
That makes sense. And
No, that makes a lot of sense. Actually, a quick question I had was, you did mention Google searches there, and what I was curious about, and I had tabbed as a question was, outside of traditional finance or even the crypto space, what technology players do you look at and you're like, okay, this is how they built the company. This is something that is worth taking lessons from or potentially to imitate, whether it be a Google or Amazon, or which are some of the older school companies from Web 2 and maybe even earlier that you're looking at is like, okay, these are very interesting models and lessons that we can draw from.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I think, so I'll tell you one thing that we don't want to do before I tell you what we do want to do as a company. So one thing we don't want to do is hire 10,000 people over the next, 3 months and imagine that will result in, 10,000x the productivity of the company. Not only does the productivity of a company grow sublinearly with the scale of the company, but sometimes it goes negative when you are not careful about it. You end up with like weird, bureaucratic structures that you didn't expect in the beginning, and suddenly simple things you might want to do get bogged down in processes. We as a company need to maintain our nimbleness in order to become, continue to dominate the space or to become the number one in the US or whatever our goals are. And so we want to sort of maintain this sort of small startup feel, even though we're very large as a company. So we're something like 200-ish people total, 250.
Is that globally?
That's globally.
Oh, wow.
But something around like 20-ish, 25 software developers, depending on how you count.
Oh, damn.
I mean, compare that to some of our competitors who have like thousands of engineers. So it's just a thing that we want to, emulate. I think I've heard about stories of, like Netflix in the early days where, they had their initial business and it was, as you guys remember, like mailing out DVDs, and it was like going okay, but not great. And they grew pretty quickly though with funding. And then they realized that like there were like lots of people who weren't contributing to the essentials of the company. And they had this sort of complete turnover. A lot of people left, and they were left with this really small group of people who were super passionate about the company and were all incredibly essential. And from that grew the Netflix business that we know today. And I'm obviously like aligning a lot of details here, but the idea of having a like mostly cloud-based, fully digital, very nimble, small, very dedicated team of a company is, I think, the sort of atmosphere that we're going for.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Go ahead, Jack.
Yeah, Brett, this is a little bit of a rewind to the point you brought up earlier about anybody can compete in this space, combined with the small team piece that you just mentioned. And we did an episode about a month ago on the Superbowl ads, and we talked about the couple of like crowdsourced memes that came out of the Coinbase. You probably remember this vividly, but the SBF haircut that was bouncing around the screen.
Yep, we did that one. The guy who did that is sitting like right over there.
That's well, please, funny. Please send our regards, meme master. I was just curious about, obviously distribution is incredibly important, and you guys seem to have like tapped into the culture in a way that other exchanges aren't able to do. And I think that does have a lot to do with like bureaucracy and hiring people that maybe didn't grow up natively in the space, but just curious what you attribute that to, how you guys think about distribution, just opining on that, I think would be super interesting for everyone who listens and us.
Yeah, I think it goes back to the stuff we were saying earlier in the podcast about just Twitter and reaching people directly. And this is the kind of thing where like, if on day one, having known nothing about crypto and coming from, traditional finance companies, I was like trying to speak to the crypto masses, I would just fail miserably, right? You need to kind of plug yourself in and get a sense of what people are talking about. Even the jargon, right? Like there's a whole language that's developed on crypto Twitter, as you guys know, and the whole like meme ethos. And I think that between Sam and the rest of us, we're living that. And so we now get a sense of like, here's what people want to hear from us. And especially you see this in these even more niche communities like NFTs, where that is itself a niche community that has its own way of talking to each other and its own understanding of what's important and what's not important, and what's, sort of corporatization of NFT versus what is like actually being part of the culture. And the culture is very important there. And what we don't want to do is like be a big company that sort of swoops in and tries to pretend like we know what we're talking about, as opposed to just being part of the dialogue. And so between things like our Superbowl ad having, a sense of humor about ourselves as a company, to the memes that we put on our FTX NFT Twitter, like we're trying to stay in touch. We don't want to seem out of touch.
And obviously talent plays a big part in that as well. Just getting people working that are plugged in. Like you said, that like Hello Kids with the skateboard slung over the shoulder is how a lot of these brands come off. So you guys are doing a great job there. And like I worked in advertising for a long time, and just the process of getting things approved and waiting for a moment to pass is kind of, you give up so much of that upside in not being able to act quickly. So what you mentioned about staying small on that front, it's not just like shipping code that matters, it's responding to moments too.
Yeah, it exactly. It doesn't just apply to code. It applies to like a tweet. It applies to an advertisement. Like there could be a moment like, Tom Brady's retiring and unretiring, where there's like an opportunity there to use the moment and do something that's like fun and engaging. And right, if you have to go through like several board meetings worth of approvals, it's gone. The moment's passed, and that's somewhat of the hazard of the social media world, is that if you're not plugged in at every moment and ready to respond spontaneously to things that are going on, like it's just going to pass you by.
Just want to follow up with that to Jack's point was, we have to talk about the Larry David ad, and how much involvement did you have? Like, and if it wasn't so much, like, what can you share about the entire process? Because I read up on it, and it's insane that it happened, because Larry David obviously doesn't do very many of these, and I would love to get some background on it and your reaction to the final product.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I was only involved a teeny bit at the beginning of the process, and like on some of like approvals along the way, especially like on spending and things like that. But what I can tell you is that we work with this really great company called Dentsu, McGarry Bowen, and they've done a couple of our ads. They did our two Tom Brady ads, the trade, and a couple of the other one. I can't remember the name of it, but they've been so great to work with. And so we knew we wanted to do something for the Super Bowl. We weren't sure what it was, but we had to do something. And so, we bought the space and then said, okay, we got to fill it. And Dentsu had come up with these different ideas and pitched different, possibilities for what to do there. And they came up with this idea, I'm sure we're not the first person to do something similar to the ad that we did, but this idea of a person who's, screws up through history and then misses all the big things that are happening. And they had the idea of like, this would be perfect for Larry David. And the problem, of course, as you know, is that he does very few advertisements. Sorry, he does zero advertisements. It's not something that he's done before. And I think a large part of that is him wanting to feel that the ad itself and the script really speaks to him, and the concept really speaks to him and his character. And so when he was pitched this idea, he just loved it. And he spent like an hour and a half riffing on all the different characters that could exist and all the different timelines and possibilities for comedy. And he just loved it. It was really integral part of the process. So much so that at some point it was like completely out of our hands. He wanted to pick, he did all the script. He was there for the full, 3 days of filming. He edited it himself. He was super, super involved, and he just loved the concept. And I think he got to be his character. He got to include, inside jokes from Curb in different of the storylines. And that's why, I think that's why it came together so well, is because he was such a deeply integrated part of that process from the beginning.
I think a lot of the, obviously you're going to get both sides, right? The majority, I'd say like 90% plus of what I saw was like, this is the funniest Super Bowl ad we've seen in X years, right? But obviously the criticism is like, oh my God, how much money did they pay Larry David? I think what people don't understand is Larry David is comically rich already, right? He's like worth $500 million. So I think that what you brought up was so interesting, was like, this was like a creative project for Larry David, right? It wasn't about getting the bag. This is an amazing creative opportunity.
Right. I mean, there were a lot of comments that were like, man, I would totally pay to see a show where each episode or each season was like one of these timelines, like Larry David in, Victorian England. So people just really loved the production value and the creativity that went through it. And yeah, I think you always hear like the whataboutisms in terms of spending, right? Like, oh, well, what could they have spent that X millions of dollars on instead to like improve their product or whatever people say. And first of all, it's not an either or, thankfully for us. Secondly, that how many people now talk about and think about and know about FTX as a result of that ad. And it's very difficult to put a price tag on, especially if we want to grow and we have this new product we're going to launch with derivatives or with stocks, and people are going to hear, instead of being like, who's FTX? They can be like, oh, FTX, I know them. They made me laugh at the Superbowl.
Yeah, Brett, we sort of extrapolated from the ad as well that the way it was pitched is to kind of address the skeptic, or at least to frame it from the skeptic's point of view, where that, some of the like mass market advertising feels like it's saying something that people that are already convinced already know, if that makes sense. Like framing it that way was really clever. And I think what I'd love to hear you talk about a bit more is like how you think about like customer acquisition, like who isn't already using FTX that you want to get on the platform. And I think giving a sense of scale as to like who is left to onboard would be really helpful. I don't honestly have a great picture of that myself. So really curious to hear you talk about that.
Yeah, look, we're still small as a retail user base. And, we have something like 1.5 million users in the US. Coinbase has something like 50 million users. I think the number is larger actually. So there's a lot of people left on board, but the question of like, who are those people? I think there's basically two camps. There's ones who are using other services and have not yet switched over to us. And a lot of that has to do with, we need to make sure that the product is superior. We need to message to people that they'll pay lower fees, which is definitely true with us. We need to give people enough of an interesting and diverse product set that incentivizes them to do the high fixed cost operation of moving their assets and their portfolios from one exchange to another. And there's a new demographic, which is people who are getting into crypto for the first time, and they're going to make their choice. They're going to type in buy Bitcoin into their app store, and maybe they'll click the first thing that comes up, or maybe they'll click the first thing that they've heard of, or maybe they'll do a little bit of research. And how can we help them make the best possible choice for them? And hopefully that choice leads them to FTX. Those are the two main demographics of people that we have sort of yet to onboard. And we're going to be spending a lot of time and money and effort and engineering power over the coming, let's say 1 to 2 years on trying to now onboard the masses to FTX now that we have such a good hold on the institutional market.
Awesome. Great answer. Thank you.
Brett, I just had a follow-up question to that. First of all, thanks for sharing all of that. That's really, really interesting. I think the bigger question around like how you're getting out to the masses, you've talked about like the partnerships or the celebrity endorsement side in your ads with Tom Brady and Larry David, the Super Bowl ads. Just from my experience seeing a lot of like technical founders, when they start, especially in the smaller stages, a lot of them don't prioritize this stuff, which I think is actually a huge miss for a lot of them, especially when they get to a certain scale. You guys are at the scale where you can afford a Super Bowl ad, and it's kind of a fast moving market where you need to capture as much of the market as early as possible. So I'm curious to hear a little bit more about that beyond just the ads. I know you're also sponsoring like stadiums and probably teams and all that sort of stuff too. And then just beyond kind of like advertising itself, I'm sure there's like partnerships is another big channel that people normally kind of grow through as well. So how are you guys thinking about that beyond ads?
Yeah, our initial thought in this space was that if we want to grow quickly, and not just sort of slowly and organically through things like traditional digital advertising and marketing, we need to do big things, to say it in the least sophisticated way possible. We need to do a few very big things to reach as mass an audience as possible. And there are very few things that compare to naming an entire stadium or being the official crypto partner of all of Major League Baseball. And so there's two sides to when we think about these other kinds of marketing type maneuvers, like partnerships or naming properties or working with professional athletes or other celebrities. One is the branding aspect of how do we get people to know and trust and think about FTX. And the second is the marketing side of how can we actually use those opportunities to bring in users. So an example might be at the opening night of the Heat season this year, everyone in their seat got like a towel with a QR code. And if they scan the QR code, they got a free NFT that, commemorated their evening for the opening night of the Heat. And in order to reclaim that NFT, they needed an FTX account. And so that brought in some number of thousands of people who were signing up for an FTX account for the first time and learning about us. And so those are unique opportunities for us to leverage our partnerships to bring people in. So when we think about new partnerships that we want to do, it's going to be a combination of what is the brand value to us, and then what can we actually do to activate those opportunities to grow our user base directly.
That makes sense. Yeah, well, you just mentioned NFTs there. That was something we wanted to talk to you about as well. You'll see our very own Jack is wearing his Nouns hat today, which is iconic in the NFT world, and he's the biggest in NFTs out of three of us anyway. So curious on your kind of point of view on NFTs and how FTX is thinking of NFTs kind of going forward.
So we're excited about NFTs for a couple of different reasons. The technology is super interesting because being able to provide proof of digital ownership is something that I think we have taken for granted has not really existed well on the internet up till now. And the second is that as a way of onboarding people to crypto, it's a lot easier to wrap your head around this is a collectible, rare thing, as opposed to you have to open a non-custodial wallet and you have to understand the difference between Ethereum and Solana and what are different tokens and DeFi and all the concepts around crypto that make it somewhat difficult to swallow. We think NFTs are a particularly good way of onboarding people into the crypto ecosystem. So that's why we have invested time into building out our NFT marketplace so we can jump into. But the thing that we're most excited about is that NFTs are going to become a technology used in a variety of different circumstances outside of just sort of the consumer collectible marketplace. One of the biggest areas of this is gaming, where we think that games want to use blockchain technology. And it could be that it's a brand new game that's completely built around some kind of play to earn mechanic or otherwise blockchain technology like Axie Infinity, or it could be some existing AAA studio or publisher who wants to retrofit some existing game and, for example, make their NFT, their skins for their characters available as NFTs. But these game studios are not going to build crypto expertise overnight. They're looking to partner with companies that can help provide those technological services on the back end so they can focus on game creation. So we're talking to a number of different game studios that want to use FTX and white label our product inside of their game and their application or whatever it is. And so that's why we're investing in NFT technology as well. So we can be the one that provides those services on the back end in a manner that's, compliant. So think about one of the reasons why a lot of the blockchain games have been pulled from the Steam store is because they're providing financial transaction services without making sure users aren't, money laundering. And so the thing that we can do as a service is we can help KYC users, we can help run transaction monitoring, we can help do custodial wallet services, we can help mint NFTs, all as a single service for these game companies.
And so, Brett, you're teasing us now because you told us as we jumped on the call, we got some exclusive news today. So what has happened today as we've been recording? You guys have just acquired a company in the space. So could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so we just announced literally a half an hour ago that we just acquired Good Luck Games, which is a small game studio that has as their first game an auto battler called Storybook Brawl. And it's a game that the FTX team fell in love with last year. And we just loved the team and their vision. And they shared a lot of our collective vision on enabling blockchain technology for games in a way that just complements and doesn't kind of ruin the game experience. And so we're super excited to now work with them on building out their game and including the different kinds of technologies that FTX can bring as they develop their Storybook Brawl game, as well as different offshoots that they have planned.
So basically what you're saying is SBF has 6 screens. One is Twitter and one is the gaming platform live while he's doing
that's the one that was facing away from the camera.
Yeah, no one can see to get him don't want to get him in trouble.
Brett, yeah, I just want to ask, so all the initiatives that you mentioned, NFTs, the games, potentially going into stocks, in 10 years from now, what does the revenue pie for FTX look like? Like, how many of that is it the white label? How much is trading fees? How many is like stuff we can't even imagine?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, so the white label services we offer for free, it's still going to be the case that basically the main fees that we will collect as an exchange will be trading fees. That's how our revenue will develop. But the question of where that comes from is interesting. There's some possibility that it is, 98% are derivatives exchange and 2% everything else. Or maybe it's 50% derivatives and 25% games and 25% spot crypto. It's hard to tell. There can be punctuated moments in our future history that could completely change the course of how we want to prioritize as a company. Like if some giant publisher, and I'm not saying this is in the works, but if there were like some, huge gaming company with 100 million users suddenly decided to make FTX their backend provider, that could become our largest revenue source overnight. But it's difficult to tell. And so that's why we are developing a lot of these foundational technologies now to prepare for the potential for those things to exist. But in the meantime, our existing business of growing our exchange, our spot, our derivatives exchange, stocks, is going to be the primary driver of our revenue, I think, over the next 1 to 3 years or so.
That, because SBF, that sounds consistent with something SBF said in that Forbes piece that came out earlier last year, where he said, if I can make this much money trading orange futures, I would. I don't know if you remember that piece, but is that kind of the idea of you guys are just building just a trading infrastructure? Doesn't really matter ultimately what it is. And do you hold a similar sentiment where you're not married to crypto? Because I think SBF has kind of mentioned that he's not married to crypto. Yeah,
I think crypto is definitely our niche, and it's certainly a lot of the ways in which we are building out our company. And we think it's like the least explored area in finance. But there's nothing specific about our derivatives exchange to crypto except for the hot cold storage system and connecting to blockchains for deposits and withdrawals. But other than that, it is a matching engine where you can deposit money and trade things and get a GUI on top of it. And so you're right, it could be a crypto future, or it could be a lumber future, or it could be an equity future, or whatever it is. We think we can provide sort of superior technology and superior risk management for those kinds of services. And it's not where we're going to start on day one. Day one is going to be, Bitcoin and Ether quarterly futures. But down the road, it wouldn't be crazy for us to expand. I think, in one of the big things that happened in the traditional financial world in the last couple of weeks, following the events in Ukraine, was the implosion of the London Metals Exchange around trading of nickel forwards. And it was sort of the perfect real-time example of why our risk system works the way it does, 24/7 real-time margining, as opposed to wait several days and hope that the person can, put up the funds if they've gone underwater. And so it's why we're hopeful that even beyond crypto, our whole ethos around how to run a risk-reducing exchange extends to other products, to metals, to other kinds of commodities, to equities, to treasuries, and we will get there over time.
Yeah, you just mentioned the war, what's happened in recent weeks. I was curious on your take on how, like, those events might be accelerating or changing the kind of space as a whole, because some people are arguing that, this kind of duplicate financial system that is decentralized should be I hate to use the word gaining, but gaining momentum in a time where, there's more uncertainty in the world. Do you hold that view, or have you seen anything from your perspective being at FTX?
the most direct thing that we have observed, and this is just a fact, is for the first time ever, a global community of decentralized users have contributed directly through no intermediaries to a government's resistance to an aggressive power. And we saw this a couple different ways. So people donated something like 100 million plus worth of crypto assets directly to the Ukrainian government's published addresses. FTX itself was contacted by the Ukrainian government to open an account on their behalf so we can help convert different kinds of cryptocurrencies into dollars or whatever currency they need and send it to them via SWIFT. And this is all possible because of crypto technology. And not that this is the thing we wanted to have happen in order to be able to prove out crypto technology, but the way that this has come about has really shown the power of having a censorless, decentralized, current borderless currency. And so that's been really exciting to see that play out in real time. I think it also has caused people to ask the hard questions about crypto, which is, what about the reverse direction? Is this a way for sanctioned governments or individuals or businesses to be able to move money outside of the financial system in a way that's undetectable? And largely that's not true. And that's why it's been a good point of discussion now to be able to actually talk through those issues and show people actually as an exchange, here's all the things that we do every day to prevent sanctioned individuals from accessing the platform. That's what all the other exchanges do as well. And it's caused some good conversations to happen with regulators, with federal agencies, with lawmakers. And that's all, I think, another positive development from all this.
That makes sense, man. Brett, I know you're going to have to leave in a second. I did have one last question for you. I don't know if the guys have anything to throw in as well, but you mentioned earlier when you met SBF originally, you guys bonded over, some work stuff, but also some shared values. You said you're both vegans, I think. And also I heard you mention this kind of shared philosophy around effective altruism. And for people who don't really know what that is, could you just explain what it is and kind of how you see your role in FTX being able to contribute to that in the long run?
Yeah, so I would say the thing that we share in common the most is sort of the philosophy of earn to give, where, there's different ways that one can give back. And one is by actually directly contributing your time to some organization that's doing things to help people. And that's fantastic, and people should do that, and that's completely necessary. There's another way to do it, which is if you're in a position where you're privileged enough to be able to sort of earn with the purpose of using that to contribute back to philanthropic causes. And I think that is, philosophy that many of us within the company share. I think effective altruism is it's a related but separate point from earn to give, which is sort of the idea of trying to maximize the dollar spent on charitable causes and different philanthropic ends. And I think that there's aspects of that which make a lot of sense, and there are aspects of that that are a little more theoretical. And definitely in terms of personal giving, it would do sort of a mix of things that maybe wouldn't be the most efficient per dollar spent according to some metrics, but are very clearly ending certain kinds of either suffering or trying to help people or animals in different parts of the global ecosystem. And so I think that's the real thing that we share in common. And again, a lot of people in the company share this as well, is that one should live their life with a purpose. They should earn with a purpose. And this is a pretty good way to figure out how to give back.
Love it, man. Trung and Jack, anything else before we wrap up? I know, Brett, you're going to have to leave in a second. So.
Yeah, I got one quick question. Brett was mentioning kind of these shared values. I was wondering, is there a book that kind of everyone in FTX is kind of reads or is handed out, or when you join, it's yo, you got to read this?
No, I don't think there's that. I'm trying to think what I
just
should
Satoshi's
recommend.
White paper, put it on the wall, framed on the wall.
I think, I don't know. I think everyone should read Animal Liberation. I think that's probably an important foundational text. I think he has a lot of good ideas there. So that would be my recommendation.
All right. Beautiful.
Love it.
Thank you.
We got some actionable advice there, Trung. That's Trung's finishing. Oh, your light's just gone off.
My son just turned off the light to my basement. He does it. Sorry, guys.
Working from home life. Yeah. Well, Brett, Jack, anything else before we?
No, I just want to say thank you, Brett.
Thank you so much, Brett. That was amazing.
taking an hour out to vibe on here is much appreciated.
Yeah, no, thanks guys. It was fun.
Yeah, we really appreciate you coming on, man. I think people are going to love this. We'll have to do it again.
Great.
Thanks
All
a lot,
right,
Brett.
man. Good luck with that new company. We'll be in touch soon.
All right, thanks guys. Take care.
Cheers, mate. Bye-bye.
Yeah, boys, how was that for you? Good little chat with Brett. Thanks to Brett again for joining and the FTX team for sorting that out for us. Yeah, I guess a way to round it up, I think we were just going to share kind of anything you guys stood out from what he spoke about.
Plenty, man. I think the size of the team was the most surprising thing for me.
Yeah,
like,
that's mental.
Kind of, yeah, it's cool to see that married up with like the way they behave and the things that they're able to do quickly. I think there's like an inevitability of sluggishness that comes with scale. Like I've thought a lot about it, but weirdly, I think the best barometer for that is the memes. Like the more like funny the memes, probably the smaller and more nimble the team.
That they're able to get it through. Yeah,
like there's this one, you know, the one where there's SBF and he's like sitting on the edge of a table looking at a window. Have you seen that one? Just like the formats that people have been able to like carve out of that is just, it's just next level, man. And then
he's hilarious, isn't he?
Yeah. And the more like I guess the more formal learning was around the like infrastructure or API play, which I think is a little different. Maybe every other exchange is doing this, but it feels like that's more in their DNA, right? It's not something that they're doing, like looking back and doing. It's an active part of their approach. The last thing, the Solana thing he mentioned is like, is Solana like the infrastructure that they're going to build underneath FTX as a platform? Like that's kind of that's an interesting way to view it, as like it's a improvement on like an AWS or something, but it's still a competitor kind of in that space versus seeing it as like a competitor in Ethereum or Bitcoin, when it really isn't, because it's not competing on the same, like if you put it on the washing machine comparison chart, there's the ticks don't line up.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking that, just to add to what you said, Jack, I think did they say 200 employees?
250, I think he said, 250.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
And how they're valued at what? Like, what's the latest 5?
FTX US is 8 billion. FTX, the main global one is 32 billion. So 40
that's
billion.
insane. 32 billion for 200 employees, 250 employees is.
Listen, I'm not going to do the math on that, but if I did, it'd be very impressive.
The revenue per employee is very high. I will say it'll be interesting. I'd love to speak to him or SBF in a few years' time and see how that kind of scaling goes, because I think normally when you get to like 200 to 500 people, you go from the point where you don't know everyone's name anymore.
Yeah.
And like the culture changes, and then you do have to kind of unfortunately create all those layers, which is annoying, but kind of necessary. And then interestingly, I could see Jack's Mr. Leverage himself eyes lighting up when he talked about, maximizing.
Jack has a book to sell them.
Yeah.
When he was talking about like scaling through, people, but like not just hiring a bunch of people. But that normally doesn't coincide with having the view of sponsoring a stadium and doing a Super Bowl.
Right.
And that was which I like. I like this like quite intellectually, what's the word? There's the word.
Contrarian.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They can hold two basically positions without them being contradictory almost. So I thought that was quite interesting. And then the last thing, the effective altruism thing is quite interesting, because I think like as the crypto space grows, you're going to get more layers of people coming in from traditional finance, from consultancy, from also like media, etc. And all those people aren't going to have that same core, like basically on the other end of the scale, Bitcoin maximalist style, libertarian, like the whole world needs
oil
to be
in puddles and stuff.
Exactly. Exactly. So, and I think that's a good thing. That's a good sign of a healthy, growing ecosystem, that you have people that have different, basically, motivations for being there. And I think it's a genuine thing. Like I have thoughts on effective altruism in general. Like overall, I basically agree with it. But I think some people kind of use that as a mask to make themselves feel okay through a life worth of, trying to maximize earnings. But either way, I think in net, it's like an overall positive thing. I'm not saying that these guys think that. I think in general, I've just met other people like that. Anything from you, Trung? Any highlights from the chat?
Well, dude, you actually, first, more serious one is what you mentioned, Bilal, is the kind of like be able to hold two thoughts is like stay nimble, but also do the splash. They kind of like almost go hand in hand though, right? It's like if you're spending 130 mil on naming a stadium, you don't have to make many decisions with a 130 mil budget anymore, right? If you had the 130 mil budget in your marketing department, you're going to have to hire a bunch of people to find different venues and avenues to spend that money, right? They're just like, you know what? Let's not waste any of our cognitive abilities, which is why Brett giving an hour, and I know that he's been on other podcasts recently, he's like, an hour of Brett's time is crazy. So valuable. It's like,
you could do the math on that, Trung.
Yeah, do the math on how much. Brett's running an $8 billion. Like they're $8 billion in private markets right now. It's probably worth way more. It will be on the next round for sure. How does this guy sleep? Is this like, we know SBF doesn't sleep very much. That's the one question I actually missed. I'm like, SBF sleeps 5 hours. I'm like, what's it like working with SBF if he's sleeping 5 hours a night? Like, what does that mean for you guys and the rest of the team, right? Like that's a definitely missed question right there. But
I had one missed question, which when we were talking about Solana and ETH, I didn't get to ask about like layer 2 scaling stuff for ETH, because that would be kind of relevant. But anyway, there's always questions you can't get to. So Trung, did you freeze there, mate? If you're on camera, make sure we don't. Oh no, you're good. But let's make sure we keep that in, because that was funny. I
gotta look at the screen again, man. Here, for the listeners, I pulled up that tweet again with SBF screen. It's literally an entire screen of Twitter. It's incredible. These guys are dedicated to the cause. And let's look at the original meme again. Not even a meme. Oh my goodness. So
he learned from his first one. Anyway.
Yeah, unbelievable. The tweet where SBF tied his shoe. I mean, you can't even call that a shoe tie. You just kind of, you know what, man? I'll be honest with you. I kind of stopped tying my shoe. I'm pretty, when I'm holding my kid and my shoe, like, it's just the last thing I'm worried about. It's my shoes tied.
You're not worried about falling over and dropping your kid? Or what?
Yeah, well, that's a good point. Editor, cut that out. I don't want family child services to come after me. But unbelievable, man.
You got the swaggy style where you don't tie it. You just let him.
Yeah, you got the Yeezys, that loose tie. Just kind of turn them into slides. Turn them into Adidas slides slippers. Other than that, man, like, the main takeaway was I'm very grateful that he took an hour out of his day. It's like, I know how important that hour is, right? And the other thing is I was happy he talked about the history of Chicago, actually. That would be a fun one to dig into, how Chicago became a derivatives capital of the world. And obviously a lot of that has to do with the fact that when they used to run trains across the country delivering stuff like cattle and agriculture, Chicago was kind of the mid-stop. That goes back to like the late 1800s. But no, that was great, man.
Mr. Professor Fat.
Yeah, prof getting it in. Yeah.
I wanted to dig into that.
1812. I don't know, maybe around 1812. Around
there. No, that was great, man. I was very, very happy to have had that chat.
I got one last thing. I think we said it when we were talking to him about, like, they seem to be the exchange, the company, the brand that like the crypto natives have embraced the most by far, with a very objective stance on crypto. Like, they've managed to do that without like doing the religious, like, really extreme points of view on why crypto needs to exist. Like, it's a very balanced perspective, like evaluates it in terms of like, this technology makes the financial markets more competitive, not like, hey, let's escape oppression or XYZ, which is all obviously byproduct of it. But I think that's a really interesting thing. They managed to accomplish that and almost signals that you don't need that narrative as badly as some people believe you do to reach a level of adoption that you need to reach to serve hundreds of millions of people, right?
Trung, you're on mute.
Oh, I thought my whole rant there was silent.
No.
No.
Wait, that was so funny. Everyone zoom into Jack's face. That was the level of annoyance and panic to be like, oh God, I'm just doing talking.
If you're listening, Jack just, you obviously heard what Jack just said, but my thing was muted and Jack thought Bilal was telling him, like, yeah, sorry, dude, we didn't hear anything. Jack's is like his moment, like the most like vulnerable Jack's ever been, and it'll never happen again. Yeah. No, Jack, although in the past you have said it, right? You have said that you're not gonna onboard a lot of people if you're making them, listen, here's a kettlebell you need to buy. Here's a plate of seed phrases that you got to onboard people with. It's they're a technology company, right? FTX is a technology company. That I think the white label that you mentioned, Jack, that was kind of the new framing of it. It's like that really kind of hammers it home. It's like, I mean, Brett said is like our totally hypothetical, but it's like we're building infrastructure. We white label it. In 10 years time or 5 years time, if a massive gaming company makes that their back end, that's our biggest revenue stream, right? They're a technology company. That's what's most important to them. It's not necessarily this other stuff you mentioned, the philosophical stuff, the value stuff, which obviously is important, but
of course, front
and center for them.
Which is like, I think Brian Armstrong even is like way in that camp, and they've succeeded at massive scale. Yeah, with just an interesting juxtaposition. We'll see how it plays out, but like they're on the right trajectory, that's for sure.
I get last question for you boys. This is a hard one because one is probably already got a head start. I don't know the market caps of these companies off the top of my head. 10 years from now, Coinbase, FTX, who's the leader in global crypto? Or Binance, or one of these others? That's a
well, Binance is much bigger than both of them.
All right, let's do the US. Let's do FTX and Coinbase then, because that might not be a fair fight.
Well, I think it'll have to be roadmap dependent in the sense of it sounds like FTX are very agnostic. They're building the technology and they will do, I mean, they talked about doing stocks. They talked about, they could be the one-stop shop for every kind of financial transaction, right? And they talk about doing like kind of events futures. They're talking about NFTs. I know Coinbase has NFTs, but let's just talk about the trading stuff. I think I saw in a previous...
Sorry, Trung, can I just 10-second interrupt, just so you know? I just looked up market cap of Coinbase is 41 billion right now. And the last valuation, which is that right? I'm looking on Google here.
3,700 employees.
3,700 employees. And the last valuation I'm seeing here is like 32 billion or something like that for FTX. Maybe it's 40 or something like that now. But yeah, just to say, they're actually on a similar scale, it looks like. So
but based on the private markets, I think what I will say is this. So I also heard or read somewhere that they want to be bigger than CME. So CME was mentioned. That's a Chicago Mercantile Exchange. It's on a CME group. They do I think they might be the world's largest derivatives exchange or futures exchange, if not one of the two or three. FTX says they want to be bigger than CME. So that'll be $100 billion company right there, right? But I mean, they're building towards that. Like if crypto is the wedge into becoming a derivatives, a futures exchange, a one-stop shop where everything's just better than the existing system, then I mean, I think FTX's technology angle is what makes it interesting. Yeah. It's like think of it as the AWS for crypto, right? If that is even something, I don't know if that's what they're thinking about, but if that is what they're doing, this white label kind of play, it's interesting, man. I don't know Coinbase's thing, but it sounds
say it, Trung. Say it.
You're on the fence right now.
Yeah, I'm staying on the fence, bros. I'm staying on the fence.
I'll say it. FTX.
FTX. I mean, honestly, I didn't realize they were that close in valuation, and the fact they're still a private company is kind of crazy, right? And and then second.
Years. They've done this for 3 years.
Remember their 420.69 raise? We should have brought that up as well.
That's true, actually. I was just going to say one other thing. I forgot the number he said, but the outside of the US, how much more volume was going through their systems with how many less users or whatever. That I forgot the number. So
I think it's like they're 2 to 3 times larger in terms of volume versus Coinbase, but they have maybe a tenth of the users.
There we go. And
unreal, right?
For people listening, Jack has just pulled up Coindesk.com. FTX rate is 420,690. That is so funny. What is that? 420 million, basically 420.6 mil. That's insane. There's a lot of zeros there. I was
man, they're the meme masters, man. I think that edge is kind of incalculable what that can lead to if they continue to stay on that edge and play well there. It's
I love that hair just popping up. I'm assuming
there he is. I mean, it's the meme is strong, man. We're betting on the meme.
That's it. All right. I think I would actually say, and genuinely, before we had this conversation, I didn't know enough about FTX at that level, but now I'm seeing that they're a similar scale and they're so much younger. This is like the Arsenal bet for me. This is young Saka, young Emil Smith-Rowe, youngest manager in the league. This is it. This is FTX is the Arsenal of the crypto world.
Oh my goodness!
You heard it here first. We need these analogies every week,
which means not won anything for several years. But anyway, I think I hope any football fans at FTX don't take offense to that. But all right, boys. Anything else before we wrap it up? I think that was really fun chat.
That was fun. That was great. The last thing I mentioned, and we've kind of talked about it, is that their sense of the meme and jokes is like Brett was very easygoing, right? He's like, he gets it.
Yeah, completely, man. Well, if you're listening to this, you made it all the way here, let us know. I mean, we don't do that many episodes with guests. We have quite a high bar for guests. We get people pitching us or like introducing us to people, and we say, like, we generally know people prefer it when it's 3 of us. At the same time, looking at all of our numbers recently, our 2 most listened to episodes were actually with guests. So Tom Osman, our boy, and Rick Burton were the 2 most popular episodes we've ever had. So I will say, I think guests can work if we get like good guests and if we have an interesting angle. But yeah, let us know what you think of this one. You can comment on YouTube, tweet us or whatever, or comment in the Telegram group. People do that as well. And as always, we really appreciate the support and love, and we will see you on the next one.
Thank you all.
See you guys next week.